I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, Naturopathic Doctor.
Do you like grocery shopping? I love grocery shopping. There is something totally relaxing to me about that ritual of pushing the cart around the store and picking out all the things. And it's not because I make these epic, magical, special, unique meals every single week. I've talked in other episodes how that is absolutely not the case. It's just there's something about going around and collecting the things that are going to set me up well for a week that makes my heart and my brain happy at the same time, and therefore I love grocery shopping. Welcome to another solo episode of Women's Health Unplugged. And this episode, we're talking about the non-negotiables when we're shopping. And I think the purpose of this episode is to really help you build on some health infrastructure so that your weeks are running smoother. Because the reality is that our habits are really what dictates our health, right? Your week is not broken on the one cupcake or one missed meal or one peanut butter sandwich. It's on the repetition of habits that we execute on every single week. And so when we talk to patients and people about changing their health habits, I think sometimes we oversimplify what it will actually take for them to execute it, right? We'll say some things silly, like take your lunch, right? Take your lunch to work. Stop eating at the food court and take your lunch, without realizing that the things that need to happen for that person to be able to pull that off, even just for one day, looks like them having time to go get food or the capacity to have food delivered to their house. They need to have the time to cut it up. They need to have the knowledge on what to actually make themselves. They need to put all of the food that they just cut up or prepared or had as a leftover, which again requires planning, into a little container that they then need to remember to take to work with them. They need a place to store it while they're at work if they need refrigeration for that thing. They then need the time at work to actually eat it, which I think that is a different topic for another day. And then they need to bring that little container home. They need to have the bandwidth to empty it out and rinse it out and put it in the dishwasher and do it all over again the following day. So when we talk about these, quote unquote, simple health habits, we're actually talking about you having really deep infrastructure in your weekly routine in order to make that happen for yourself. And it starts with, if you remember that first thing I mentioned, it starts with shopping. It starts with grocery shopping. And it's interesting because sometimes when I talk to people about their nutrition and they'll say, well, I don't actually have the food here, right? Now that we're talking about it, Jordan, turns out there's actually not any food here. That starts to become the greatest barrier to their success with nutrition. You can't succeed on a nutrition plan when the food is literally not in your house. And so you have to go shopping or you have to order it or click and pick up or whatever it is. You cannot excel in your nutrition if you don't buy the food. And I know that sounds so profound, but honestly, when I'm working with patients, we sometimes skip to what's a good recipe for? And I often will see that online that we're talking about recipes. I'm like, people don't need more recipes. People need to go to the frickin' grocery store and just get some food. So that spawned the idea of the topic today, which is my non-negotiable shopping list. And the things that I've put on my shopping list that are non-negotiable really came from asking myself some pretty important questions and learning, reevaluating, I'm going to use the pivot word, pivoting, to continuously move to meet my needs, whatever they have been in each sort of stage of life. These are the questions you have to ask yourself before you can even start to make that non-negotiable list, because your list probably doesn't need to look the same as mine. I mean, some of the foods that I've picked, I will admit, are really great, and maybe they do need to be on your list. But really, when you're choosing this non-negotiable shopping list, which I'll get to mine in a second, I need you to be able to ask yourself some pretty important questions about what is happening with your life, with your nutrition, so that you can even come up with what that list needs to be, because it might be different than mine. So where my list comes from is having this sort of reflective process about where my pain points are in my week. And my work life and work-life balance and work-food balance have had various struggles and successes over my last 15 years of working in clinical practice. There were years where I didn't have that many patients, and so it didn't matter. I could just eat whenever, and I actually had time to leave my office and go pick up food. If I was to arrive at work without food, I could go get something. Then there were years where I was double, triple booked, and there was no lunch, and I would often eat my lunch on my way racing to get my kids from extended care, from school, because that was the first time that I had an opportunity to shove things in my mouth. Once the pandemic hit, actually, I reinstated a lunch break in my clinical day, and now have a minimum of half an hour to eat my lunch every day that's carved out around lunchtime. I know this sounds like an incredibly novel concept, but this was not something that was in my day before. And so my pain points with my nutrition were different at those different times of my life, right? If you can imagine, I had all the time in the world and I could leave and I could go pick something up. My pain point was that I needed to have easy, good, accessible options that could compete with a slice of pizza. Then there were moments in my career where I had not built in the time for food. And so liquid meals became the staple, right? Liquid meals and yogurt was how I managed to make it through those days, because there wasn't the opportunity to heat anything up, right? People be like, oh, how is that reheated the next day? I'm like, what do you mean reheated? We don't reheat food here. We just eat food. We eat all the cold leftovers the following day. And now, to a slightly more peaceful period of time with my nutrition at work, where I have a legitimate 45 minutes and I actually have melted some of the cheese on some of my lunches because I have the opportunity to go and use the microwave. So whatever your pain points are, your non-negotiable list needs to be sort of reflective of that. And really, when I think about my own personal pain points, a lot of them stem from the fact that I don't really love making my lunch. I do it 100% of the time. I take my lunch 100% of the days to work. In the last year, one time I did not bring my lunch, and I had to order a $25 omelet from Uber Eats. And I was so disgusted with myself that this was what needed to happen, that I don't know. I ate my omelet, let's just say that, and I was fine with it. But one time in the last 12 months, I have not brought my lunch to work. So this is just a non-negotiable for me. And when I think about how to build my non-negotiable shopping list in general, my biggest pain point is lunch. It's like taking my lunch to work. I can put anything together for dinner. I really love breakfast food, and so breakfast I find to be a joy. Lunch is the thing I hate. So a lot of my non-negotiable shopping list things are around how to fuel myself in the middle of the day, because I can actually make the other parts of my day work quite seamlessly. And I would think when you start to think about what your non-negotiable list should be, you need to think about what your pain point is. Is it that you don't have time for breakfast? And so that has to be something that you literally have sitting there waiting for you every week. Is it dinner, right? Is the amount of time and bandwidth and stress and maybe special nutrition needs that you have, or maybe dinner's the thing that's getting in the way, and you need some easy food staples that you have in your fridge all the time that are going to make you more successful. But for me personally, it was lunch. That's been my pain point. And when lunch is not going well, the rest of my nutrition plan is also not going well. So those days when I'm eating my lunch on my way home from work, I also eat a bag of salt and vinegar chips when I get home. And then I eat all my dinner. Then I eat the rest of my kids' dinner. And then I eat something after dinner. And it's really because I haven't fueled myself well through the day that I end up in this dumpster fire landslide of eating from the moment that I get home until the moment that I go to bed. And I often wake up hungry the following day too. It's like it's like payback for not eating well the previous day. My body's like, yeah, we're just going to keep on going, Jordan. We're just going to keep fueling. So on those days that lunch doesn't go well, my whole nutrition plan doesn't go well. And so that needed to be something that I focused on. The other pain point in my nutrition is meeting my protein needs with ease. It's hard for me to get the amount of protein that I require to support my training, to support my own personal nutrition goals and needs without it being an incredibly mindful component of my nutrition. And so when you are thinking about your nutrition and your non-negotiables, partly it needs to reflect like which meal do I need to have problems with? And mine was lunch. Which nutritional thing do I have a hard time getting in on a consistent and regular basis without there being like this really accessible solution for myself? So for it's protein. And if I don't have those like easy to grab protein sources, I am under on my needs for that very easily. I have a really easy time hitting my fat needs. I have a really easy time hitting my carb needs. Although when I transitioned from like a very low carbohydrate diet to a moderate carbohydrate diet, like I currently have, I found fitting carbs in really tough as I like psychologically recovered from that diet. And so you'll notice one of my non-negotiables is actually just a easy carb to help bring my carb numbers up. And when I say numbers, I don't mean I'm necessarily tracking. I just mean like it's contributing to my carb intake for the day. But the protein is the one that for me, if the options are not easy and accessible and possible, then I'm just not meeting my own personal needs. And just as a reminder, we probably need about 1.5 grams or more, depending on your goals, per kilogram of body weight. And so for me, that puts my protein needs in and around like somewhere between like 90 and 120 grams, depending on what the goals kind of are for the phase that I'm in. And that's really hard to do if I'm not like being quite intentional about it. And so protein is the gap in my nutrition if I don't pay attention to it. The other question to sort of ask yourself as you're creating your list is, are there any foods that without it, like just things feel like they're a bit more haywire, or that you don't have the fallback safety net that you have when that food is around in your house? So for example, we've had times in my family where our fallback was eggs, right? We went through a lot of eggs, and that's not my fallback food now. But there was a time where we easily, as a family of 4, were eating like 48 eggs per week. And part of it was a reflection of the fact that it was fast and easy. We could bake a lot of things with eggs that my kids would eat. It was an easy, good protein source for them. And there were many times when I was like getting home from work and had a 20-minute turnaround before I had to run out the door to go to the gym. And I would make 3 eggs because it just fit. And so for you, as you're asking yourself that question, is there a food that when it goes missing or it's been eaten, that my week is not as smooth? So for some patients, that's like the cans of tuna that just live in the fridge or freezer. No, it doesn't live in either of those two places. Tuna lives in the cupboard, or the berries that are in the freezer, or whatever it is. Like, what is the thing that without it, your life is a little bit more chaotic? Your nutrition life is a bit more chaotic. That thing should probably go on that non-negotiable list. And the strategy I use, and I'll talk about that when I go through my foods, is that your minimums, right? I mean, think about a store like that has minimums, right? We'll reorder when we get down to this many of this product. I think in most people's pantry and kitchen, our minimums need to change. So families will buy 12 eggs when mathematically they need 18 for the week, right? Or people will buy 3 cans of tuna, and yet there are 5 lunches that we are supposed to be making from this. We need to change what our minimums are in our fridge or in our pantry. And that thing that you're changing those minimums on needs to be the thing that you can like barely function without. So there was a time where we really struggled with eggs, and we just started buying 5 dozen every single week until we got to a place where we understood how many eggs we actually needed for a week to function. And now we're down to 2 dozen, partly because we're not eating them as frequently as we were, for no reason other than that my kids have now decided that scrambled eggs are disgusting. But we've figured out what that sort of bare minimum needs to be in the fridge so that we always have this thing that we can turn to that nutritionally is meeting our needs. And so I would think about what that thing is for you. The other thing that I would put on my non-negotiable shopping list are things that you feel deep in your soul have to be fresh. So technically frozen vegetables, frozen fruit have the equivalent nutritional benefit of fresh. There are still some things that we just deeply desire to be fresh and may want to shoot for that as being something that's non-negotiable for you. So this perishable item that needs to be bought on the regular, that's a thing that maybe should go on that list because that's not a thing that you can like stockpile. It's not a thing that you can freeze and then eat at a later date, right? I think about my yogurt, right? That's a perfect example of this. So those are the questions I want you to ask yourself before you create your list. Like, what's your struggle? Mine's lunch, right? What nutritional, like what meal is your struggle? Mine is lunch. What nutritional thing does not naturally happen for you without planning, support, infrastructure? Mine's protein. What is that thing that if it's missing, your week is not as smooth, right? Ours used to be eggs. I would say now mine is probably yogurt, but I'm going to come around to my list in a second. What is that thing that when it's not there, you like I don't want to say the day is ruined. That sounds a bit dramatic, but for me, when the yogurt's not available, it influences a lot of my other food choices throughout the rest of the day. And if the yogurt just had been there, then I wouldn't have eaten all of the chips because I had the yogurt. So think about what that thing is that like your week goes haywire if it's not there. And then also think about that thing that needs to be bought with high regularity because it has to be fresh for you. Okay? Cannot be frozen, cannot be stored, has to be a non-negotiable shopping thing that you get every single week because you just can't stockpile it in a way to prep yourself for later. That's how I would build your list. So to go through my list a little bit, and this list has evolved over the years, like I mentioned, my needs have changed over time. And I think even that point is quite a good reflection point for you. Like we end up in these food ruts. We end up eating the same thing over and over again because our brain like craves this consistency and the ability to just rinse and repeat ideas. We love working on autopilot. That's literally why we build habits, because it's easier to build a habit than it is to do novel things all the time. But sometimes our habit outlives its use. Sometimes the habit is no longer helpful nutritionally, but yet it's just like the thing that we've always done, right? And that's a really sort of important thing as you start to think about this non-negotiable list. It might not be the things that you're buying every single week, right? Like you might be moving around the grocery store in a total zombie daze and throwing things in your cart without thinking about which ones are non-negotiable. The thing that you might need the most of might be the thing that's never making it into your cart, like oatmeal, right? Or something else that actually would really shift your nutrition in a positive way. So be reflective as you start to go through your list and as I go through mine, what your list actually should be. And let's compare that against what you're actually doing to make sure that we're on the right track. So my non-negotiable list. So number 1 and number 2 are quite similar. But my number 1 non-negotiable is actually a dairy-based protein. And by that, I mean either low-fat Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, or I've really been into eating, I use low-fat, but eating ricotta cheese like cottage cheese. Someone mentioned that to me once. I bought everything to make a lasagna and then was too overwhelmed to make the lasagna. And I told a friend, I'm like, I don't even know what to do with ricotta other than put it in a lasagna. And she said, I would just eat it like your cottage cheese with fruit. And it totally was a game changer for me. And now I'm a big ricotta cheese fan with fruit. So the dairy-based protein for me is solving a lot of those questions that we asked at the beginning of the first phase of the podcast. Was like, number 1, it is a portable lunch option that I can dress up or down. I can make my yogurt very few calories. I can make my yogurt a lot of calories. I can put my yogurt as a vehicle to get other things in, like almond butter or like berries. I can actually even use my yogurt to add to a salad or to add to some chicken, right? If I'm trying to make a chicken salad that's meeting my nutrition needs, if maybe I'm going through a phase where I'm trying to use less mayonnaise or something like that. The yogurt fills a massive need in my daytime nutrition because it's so easy and it's so portable. It's so high in protein. And so it's actually accomplishing a couple of those check boxes for me that make a huge difference in my life. The other thing is that it's a great either after dinner snack or I don't want to say in replacement for dinner because that's not enough food for dinner for me. But there are times where the spacing of my meals is disrupted because of the gym or training time. And yogurt is a great after the gym snack for me with some cut up banana or something to support, to have some carbohydrate in there as well. So having that item in the fridge meets so many needs out of my nutrition gaps that it just has had to become non-negotiable. And even when I look at that last question I asked, what's our minimums? I'm at minimum getting 3 large tubs of Greek yogurt plus 1 other tub of something, either cottage cheese or ricotta, or I'm at minimum getting 2 and 2, right? 2 tubs of ricotta, 2 tubs of yogurt, 2 tubs of cottage cheese. And it means that I make it all the way to the weekend easily with at least 1 serving of dairy based protein so that on that day I could at least have it and then go to the grocery store if I have to. But I just have adjusted what my expectations are. I used to just buy 1 tub. And then if a recipe called for Greek yogurt, there's lots of muffin recipes that call for Greek yogurt, I felt like it was this huge negotiation with myself. Okay, well, if I make this recipe, now there's no yogurt for Friday, right? Or now there's no yogurt for tomorrow. Or if my husband got on a yogurt kick and ate some of it, I was angry because I'm no, that's my yogurt. I bought that yogurt for me. I bought enough yogurt to make it until Thursday and you ate some of it. Now what am I going to do? That I basically just had to change the amount of yogurt that lives in my fridge. And it never goes bad. I never once have overbought on yogurt, ricotta cheese, or cottage cheese. And so I've just adjusted those minimums so that they're always there. And then if I have one of those nights where my partner's away, I fed the kids God knows what, and I don't feel like eating, I can literally have some yogurt and solve a lot of problems without having to make an epic nutritious meal for myself. So that is my number 1 non-negotiable. Number 2 doesn't fall too far behind, and my number 2 would have to be protein powder. And it has a lot of the similar qualities that I described with the yogurt. You can dress it up, right? I can make a 700 calorie smoothie that's going to be my liquid nutrition through the day because turns out we didn't book me a lunch break. Or I can pare it down to literal protein powder and water to just get those protein needs in without it being an epic meal. It also is one of those things that we've created sort of this new normal for, because in a house of 4 people who all use protein powder, we can very easily go through a tub of protein powder in a short period of time. That's one of the things that we've created as a pantry item that we need a slight overstock of all of the time. But it really helps satisfy the challenges with lunch. It is a portable thing that I can, like I said, dress up or dress down. And by that, I mean making it a more substantial meal or a less substantial meal. And it also, with it being non-perishable, means that, if I take a tub of protein powder up to the cottage and don't use it for 3 weeks, nothing bad happens to it. It's just waiting there for me until I go back on a smoothie kick. And so I find that such a great number 2 non-negotiable for me. The third one is fresh fruit. And so I know I mentioned that frozen is fine. And I actually will have frozen berries in the freezer 100% of the time. So that's maybe one of my other non-negotiables, is that there are always frozen blueberries in my freezer 100% of the time. But I also really enjoy fresh berries and fresh fruit. And that's one thing that I have to go out of my way to eat a little bit. The vegetables happen for me more naturally, Fruit is something that I found was harder to get into a good routine with because it wasn't something I naturally gravitated towards. Even as like a youth, like I don't remember like dying for some fruit. I probably was dying for like Texas toast and Cheese Whiz, but that's a totally different episode. But the fruit is something I have to be intentional about to get that nutrition into my life. And so I focus on fruit, and I like having fresh fruit in the fridge. It also helps the function of my entire family for there to be a lot of fresh fruit. And we work on having the variety where possible. So even though we get a farm share that does give us fruit, we buy additional apples, bananas, clementines, at least one type of melon. And then I will often buy those little cello packs of fresh berries. So I know the question that's going to come like, well, do you always get organic? And the answer is no. So there's going to be moments for me where I find the cost of organic to be outside of what I'm willing to spend on berries. And I think the benefit of having the berries is better than not having berries because they're not organic. So I choose non-organic berries. If that's going to compromise my ability to just get them at all, I will just choose non-organic. And it goes along a little bit with my yogurt and protein powder situation, but the yogurt plus fruit, protein powder plus fruit, that makes a lot of meals for me to be able to combine all of those things together. And so that's what I focus on. And for me, where I struggle is with snacking, especially in the evenings and on the weekends, and having that additional fruit that's there. I cut it up for my kids, but a bowl of melon in the fridge is really, really saves me on a Saturday where my weekend pattern of eating is like, you should probably look for something to eat every 45 minutes. I need some of those eating times to be fruit so that I can manage my nutrition better over the weekend, but also just hit those antioxidant needs that I have or that I want to achieve. That's where that fruit comes in. So for me, that's every single week at the grocery store, I'm getting more fruit. There's always more fruit, extra fruit. If I happen to land myself in the grocery store midweek for some reason, I'm getting more fruit. Sometimes I even buy a like straight up fruit tray and we will eat the fruit tray, right? If I feel like my week is super busy and I don't have the opportunity to cut up this fruit for myself, I will get a party fruit tray for my family. It lasts us about 3 days for us to all pick at it. And we eat more fruit if we do it that way. I don't love raw vegetables, but fruit I can pick at, and I enjoy that as a raw snack, and we can add it to my ricotta or my cottage cheese or my yogurt. So I'm a big fan of the fruit. And then my last one is popcorn. Okay, my last non-negotiable food is popcorn. And part of my popcorn, I don't want to call it an obsession, but part of my popcorn relationship started when I transitioned off of a very low carbohydrate diet. So there was a time where I was really into the paleo diet. It was at my sort of the birth of my CrossFitting about 8 years ago, where that whole culture and community was really anti-grains, anti-carbohydrates. And so I fell into that a pattern. I really was struggling to manage my weight at that time in my life. And so I thought that this would be a reasonable solution. It wasn't for me. I found it very difficult to manage my caloric intake without grains and carbs. And when I came off of that nutrition plan a couple of years later and was actually trying to learn how to get healthy carbohydrates back into my life, I found it very difficult to eat more carbs. I psychologically found it difficult. I didn't even know what to cook. I basically hadn't even eaten a fleck of rice that had fallen off of my kid's plate for years. And bringing carbs back in was very difficult for me. And so essentially every day at 4 o'clock, I found myself to be short on carbs. So I started eating popcorn. I started eating popcorn every day at 4 o'clock. And at the beginning, I literally had to eat like 4 cups of popcorn in order to meet my carbohydrate needs. And this was at a time where I actually was working with a nutritionist. I actually was we were maybe micromanaging my nutrition a little bit, and I needed to hit certain numbers as I recovered from this low carb diet. And I needed to eat like all this popcorn at the end of every day in order for me to hit the targets that they had set for me. And it became this like slight love affair with popcorn at the end of the day, where I saw it as being like this lovely thing that I got to look forward to at the end of every day. It was an easy snack for me to have while I made dinner. I like developed this great relationship with popcorn. And I remember popcorn when I was growing up as being this thing that always made me feel sick. Like that fake butter flavor, I literally couldn't handle. And I remember having multiple movies ruined by my nausea from having fake butter popcorn. Now I'm talking about legit good. Sometimes I'll even air pop it myself on the stove in coconut oil. I'm talking about like real legit popcorn. And so now that has become this non-negotiable for me. And what I have found, even though now I'm like prolific in my use of carbohydrates, I've fully recovered from my trauma of my low carb diet. I find the popcorn to be this thing that I don't have a problem with it in my nutrition plan. And partly the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because there has to be some joy in your nutrition. There has to be this thing that you just feel like your week is not complete without. And to me, like allowing, and I don't even like that word, but like having the popcorn means that I don't feel restricted in my nutrition. It means I don't binge eat later on other things. Having it be available for me all the time means that I actually can regulate myself and manage my nutrition in a way that's so much more positive than me trying to like constantly remind myself not to have a snack when I get home from work. I already know what the snack is. It's popcorn. And now I don't need to eat quite as much of it for it to meet my nutrition needs, although sometimes I completely blow it out of proportion, I should say, and just eat all the popcorn or a ton of it. I have to be quite cautious when we get like the Chicago mix instead, because to me, I'm just like, it's just other popcorn. It's fancy popcorn, even though nutritionally it's a very different beast. But to me, like that knowledge that I just like get to go home and have the popcorn snack every single day actually creates a real sense of like joy and relief in my nutrition plan. And I know that that doesn't sound like a epic snack, right? To just have a bowl of popcorn. But I think so much of my relationship with food, and when I think about the things I've done well and struggled with and my pain points, that has become this non-negotiable that when it is there, I actually am doing better as a whole. There's a net positive by having popcorn in my house all the time. And so I buy like the big Costco bags. I have kernels at home so that I could technically make popcorn at any minute. Drop of the hat, I can make popcorn. It's satisfied that like after work snacking where I was struggling because again, I never used to eat my lunch and then I would binge eat when I got home. I love it fresh. And so I have to pick it up every single week and or make it on demand when I need it. And so I've adjusted what my new normal is. And so I always have popcorn at home so I can always meet that need. So as you start to think about what your non-negotiable list is, I need you to ask yourself those questions exactly that I just shared. It's like, what's my pain point? What's my pattern of behavior? How do I change that pattern? What infrastructure do I need in my house in order for me to not do this every single week? What do I need in my life in order to feel balanced, meet my nutrition needs, have joy, have available snack options for myself always that actually are a net positive? How do I make sure that the foods that I want fresh are available for me every week? Are there things that I can stockpile? And do I need to adjust our minimums in our house so that I'm never left without yogurt or whatever it is? I want you to try the ricotta cheese. I feel like it's worth you trying. I want you to ask yourself those questions because that reflective process is really honestly where people get to where they want to go with their health. Because if you have that ability to reflect on what is working and what isn't, you will always find solutions. You know what needs to happen, but not if you're on autopilot, right? Not if you go through every day and don't give it a second thought what's happening with your nutrition. We'll never get there. I need you to have a reflective process for what's going on with your week and adjust your shopping accordingly. And maybe I'll see you at the grocery store and we can smile at each other because it is the most fun part of the week to go grocery shopping.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. My goal is to help you feel more confident about your health. Please remember that what we talked about today in the podcast does not constitute medical advice, nor was a doctor-patient relationship formed. If you have questions about your healthcare or about how today's topic pertains to you, please take it up with your family doctor, your specialist, or someone on your health team.